It is 4:02, and we'll go ahead and get the May 3rd, 2023 meeting of the Findlay City Council Strategic Planning Committee meeting started. Randy Greeno is not here today. He texted me earlier today and said he's not feeling well, and we'll miss the meeting today. With that, Jacqueline had circulated the minutes from the last meeting. I'd like to get those approved. Do I have a motion for approval? Motion by Mr. Russell. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Hellman. Got a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. Discussion.
Yeah, there's several spots where my name's misspelled differently throughout the document. I know it's not an easy name. So.
How would you like it spelled, Jim? Correctly. Okay. We will do a spell check on Jim's name. Certainly want to get that right. So we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes amended to correct Auditor Stasiak's name. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. The minutes are approved. Thank you. Now, going on to old business, we had talked about at the beginning of the last meeting, and I said that I would bring it up at this meeting, the basic idea of trying to find a way for us to move forward in this process and get something down on paper that gives us the branches, if you will, of the strategic plan and get that approved. The branches being the pieces, quite honestly, that we've been working on over the last 3 meetings. All of the major bullet points without all of the pieces, parts underneath. And with the idea that we can get those approved, get those solidified, and then take our time to go back, take what we've, not getting rid of anything that we've already worked on, obviously not, all the information that we've collected from the public, etc., over the last year, but then take and start to fill in those branches with the leaves, which are the action items. So did anybody else have any time to consider that idea or any thoughts along those lines? Ms. Mayor.
I would just also note that as part of that, that would be then, I'll say, all the preamble type items as well as the process type items. So it would be the entire strategic plan just without the action item level, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so as I shared at the last meeting, I think there's pros and cons to moving, using the momentum we have and continuing through with the action items, but I also think there would be a lot of value in getting the main goals, the process, framework, and objectives passed, and then being able to then kind of divvy up the action items maybe to various committees of council and being able to flesh those out a little bit more and maybe even add some additional ones to some of the different objectives. So I think overall it's a good idea and hopefully could get us a little more solid adoption and help the community understand what the process is for then also bringing forward additional feedback, which I know has been a question as well.
I think it also gives us the ability then to finish this, end our formal engagement with Planning Next, as then we would take on the rest of the process to fill in the action items. I don't think we would need their help getting that done, and then allows us to finish up that engagement with them. Mr. Russell.
I want Planning Next engagement to continue because they are because of what they do for the implementation and the feedback loop. Unfortunately, we spent so much time obstructing this process from going forward in a timely manner and used all their money we haven't gotten to the parts that Jeff, you and I have talked about. So I wouldn't say that my goal would be to do this so we can end with planning next. I hope we can get to the meat of this, which is the implementation.
Understood. Denny?
I guess I would have a little bit of concern of cutting them loose at this point completely. My preference would be if we want to cut them loose and go through here or put them on hold, and then we come up with the remainder of the bullet points in here and then have them review that at the end and maybe be part of the implementation process. It would save them some time and us some money probably.
Right. I can get on board with that, with what you both are saying. If we don't want to end our relationship with Planning Next, I'm certainly okay with that too. So that's fine. Mayor?
I guess I do just again want to clarify that the deliverable that is the next step that they've been waiting to give to us relies on us getting through this. That next step then is that implementation process, the timeline, their kind of their expertise built out in a process. Now, do I think that there may be some value beyond that initial adoption to maybe have them come back a couple of times when we're doing some of the major steps for the first time? Perhaps. But I think that, one of the reasons that we selected them is that they had a very robust document and process that we were going to be able to implement really on our own using their framework. And so I think that that's really the next step in this that we've been waiting on for them to kind of finalize their obligations. And so I feel comfortable that that will then get us to the point where we'll be able to move forward, at least for the majority. And maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I think we'll be able to move forward really with that document, the process to put it into action. We might need them here or there, but I don't foresee us keeping them on contract long term or really much beyond that kind of deliverable.
Mr. Otter?
I have a question, I guess. We have a number of outstanding items that we were going back to them for some wordsmithing, for some suggestions, for looking at whether they were broad or narrow enough. And I haven't received anything. Have we done that? Do we have that from them?
So they provided feedback on the safe community, which was the one that we had talked about and said we wanted to discuss. And if I recall correctly from maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago, we were going to go back to them, and you said that you didn't want us to go back to them. You felt that that was the responsibility of the committee. So we had already shared those at one point, and they provided a little bit of feedback. I think it was on the live, learn, work, play, that one. And so I had provided a recommendation, but beyond that, they have not given any other feedback. There's a couple of notes of items that they have, that they intended to go through as part of their kind of final review and giving it back and saying, here's a couple things we would tweak. But overall, they have not given us anything further. It was this one, I think, was the other one we had asked them for.
Jim?
So we won't be done with this high-level branch section until they complete that review of that and make those suggestions. I don't think there's a lot of them. I don't think there was more than a half a dozen of them, was there?
No, what I'm saying is we decided that we weren't going to ask them for that feedback because we felt it was the responsibility of this group.
I thought there were some words. I'm talking about the wordsmithing and some of the conceptual stuff. We were talking about words like pride and things like that. There were a number of things that they were going to come back, or we were going to inquire of them. So that inquiry did not happen, I presume, then?
So
I guess where are we at with those specific items, those goals, and that language?
that is part of the discussion from the committee tonight that I had sent out to the group over the last 2 or 3 weeks multiple times. My understanding from the last committee, or maybe the meeting before that, when we first went through them, I sent an email back to Planning Next and we asked them for feedback on the safe community goal and the live, work, whatever play one, to help pare it down. They sent some feedback that we discussed as the group, and we said that didn't really do much for us. And so that's when we worked as the committee again. And I put together this recommendation for further discussion after our last meeting. But no, we're not, at this point in time, we're not waiting on anything from Planning Next. They're waiting on us to say we want to continue to contract with them. And then they were going to work on hopefully once we got these items to them and decided how we wanted to move forward, then they would work on putting together kind of the big picture. Am I off base on
No, I
my
don't think so.
recollection?
I think though, Jim, I think your concerns would be taken up because ultimately we're going to give this document back to them for a final once-over. I mean, if there's areas that we still have some concerns with, we can highlight those and have them look at those sections specifically to give us some additional help. But they ultimately will get a review of this to see if it's meeting with the original goals. Before we take the next step. That's why I want to get through this part so we can so that we can give this back to them and, you know, take that next big step in the process.
So process-wise, or I guess let's define that a little bit for conversation. If we said we wanted to send this to them, we would send this to them and we'd say, okay, frame this up, get it all together. We're going to put our process together for how we leave out the tree, and then come back and work with you potentially down the road for some implementation if that's the desire of this body. One of my big concerns would be that this body stays involved with initiatives as they come from the community. One of my concerns from the beginning, and best practices when you look at the Government Finance Officers Association recommendations and some of the other things that are out there, is that you have a community engagement process that's very explicit to strategic planning and involvement in budgeting and things like that. So from a fiscal perspective, there's really no place for the community to go. And one of the comments I've made multiple times is when someone in the community has an idea, and a great example would be the old Rotary Way, when Rotary walked away from Rotary Way by the library there, that little alley, there was a group, there were a couple people that came to the city and said, we'd like to take care of that, and we'd like you to fund a little bit of it, you know, give us X dollars, give us a budget, and we'll take care of it. And it died for lack of interest or lack of a champion. And for me, I think that would be an example of something that would come to this committee. I would say, you would say, hey, write a letter or come to the strategic planning committee, and when you get, you know, at the chairman's pleasure, say you get 2 or 3 different things, you have people come in once a quarter or twice a year or whatever's appropriate.
Sure.
And make those suggestions. Then this committee would decide, I would think, whether or not they would recommend it going to another committee or a council committee, and each chairman certainly would have the authority to decide that on their own if they didn't, if they did have a champion. But the idea is, put that, I would see, if we're going to forward this Planning Next as it sits, we need to clarify the process of how leaving out that tree is going to look long term. I think to not do that would be irresponsible of this committee.
Jim, let me clarify. When you say not, your last sentence, sorry, I didn't quite understand. Not leaving out the tree?
In other words, we want, if we're going to forward what we have today to Planning Next, or with a few tweaks or whatever, the next step of this body should be making sure we have a common understanding before making that recommendation of what the process is going to be for filling the leaves in the tree. In other words, what's this body's going to roll, what's this body's role in it, and how will it move forward. I don't think you should just presume based on what we have that it's going to go to various council committees. I think that kind of defeats the purpose and the scope of the duties is outlined by the charter of this committee.
No, I'm sorry. Mr. Russell, would you like to be recognized?
Well, the comments changed in the middle. It was originally about how to take public input, and then it changed to about how to add leaves on the tree. You know, the public input, that's exactly what what Planning Next, that's part of the processes that they excel at. That's part of the implementation and the feedback loop and the giant wheel of the presentation. That's their expertise. I don't think I don't care if it's the auditors, state, whatever the state auditor's best practices, guidelines. The best practices I'm looking for are the ones from the vendor that we chose in an open bid process, and it was those processes that won them our business, and we haven't, and we've spent so much time defining the definition of the word "is" in these meetings, to the frustration of the majority of the members of the council, or of this team, that we haven't gotten to the meat of what they do. And I want to get to that. I want to get to that process.
Yes.
But we'll continue to have this conversation. And you know, at some point in time, the majority of the members of this committee are ready to go forward. Let's go forward.
I think all of our points are the same. I think we're on the same boat here. I would be shocked if what the final implementation or the process that planning next, brought to us did not have a community input in that loop. In fact, if it doesn't, then we will implement that, because Jim, what you're saying is spot on. That has to be an ongoing part of the process. And how this committee would be involved in that's up for discussion. You know, are we the first person or the last person to talk to? I don't know, but we can talk about those things. So I think we're all on the same page here, unless I'm completely missing something. So with that, I would go back, and then Jim, to answer your first question, which was the process of what would happen from here. Yes, I would see this. We would give the branches to planning next, let them go through that, and then with that, they can start their final process of putting together the final strategic plan, the book, their deliverable, if you will, and then defining the process that we just talked about. And that's why I was saying that, to me, gets to the end of their engagement. However, knowing that we have the next step of filling in the leaves, we could certainly keep them around, per the suggestion of the councilman, to do that, to help us with that process if we were to run into any issues. I think we'll be able to do that relatively easily. Yes, sir.
I would add to that, excuse my grammar. If this moves forward and goes to planning next, those conversations should be primarily in written form, via email or whatever mechanism, and distributed to the entire group. So we're all part of that communication process, and so that you can meet, so that we don't have, I don't think it's fair to filter or vet their information down to us. I just want to clarify that, and that's not an accusation. That's just an observation and a concern. I want to make sure we get unfiltered information as a committee, an entire committee, so the committee is making the decisions before, as a group.
No, fair enough. And I think depending on when we get the branches approved, I know the mayor and I have a short meeting planned with planning next tomorrow, just from logistical standpoint, because we haven't, quite frankly, talked to them in over a month or more, just to find out where they're at and give them an update on where we're at. That's all the extent of that meeting is supposed to be. We do have on council's plate tonight, I believe we're in third reading tonight, for the extension or additional funds to be approved for this. So that'll come up for a vote this evening. So what I would tell them, Jim, is yes, once we get the branches approved and we give that to them, the next meeting then here with the whole group, we would conference them in so that you can get your unfiltered and unfettered access to them. And I think that makes sense, Jim. So it's a good point. Yes, sir.
Since you brought it up too, for the record, I believe I abstained from the vote to approve the additional funds to planning next. And after reviewing the contract, their obligations, where we're at, and the communications, I am not for paying them any additional funds for where we're at right now, because of the state of their deliverables, I would be for finishing up the process under the contract as it sits today, and then bringing an additional engagement proposal from them to this group to consider as a whole. But in terms of where we're at and what we've done, council certainly tonight, when they read that legislation, has the authority to pass it. And of course, I would pay anything that was lawfully passed by this body. But as a member of this committee, I don't think the money's due. And I disagree 100% with Mr. Russell's accusatory comments and his opinion on how this has evolved. I have said from day one, I will not trade expediency for the lack of thoroughness. And anybody who will, that's for them and their conscience to deal with. But I do feel that the $125,000 that this body spent, I feel we deserve a little more for the money. And that's not to criticize their skills, their qualifications, but the contract was specific in terms of how and what was to be delivered. And it did not, they certainly have had other customers that have taken longer for different aspects. So I just want to make sure the record reflects that although I abstained from the original vote, I am against paying them an additional dollar under this current contract for what we're asking to be done.
Mr. Hellman.
Jim, I guess I feel obligated to respond to that out of all due respects. And I don't think it was Planning Next's fault that this has taken this much time. We're the ones, I think, that have burnt up the clock. And they were involved with the process right from the beginning and listened in on a lot of these conversations. And I wouldn't expect them to do that gratis. We asked them to be our consultant and to guide us through the process, which I think they've done up to this point. And if there's any remorse about not getting our money's worth, I think it's our fault because we're the ones that have burnt up the clock on their time. So I'm fine with moving forward.
Mr. Stasiak.
Yeah, I completely respect those comments, Dennis. And in reading the contract did not have a time stipulation. Had they stipulated that over this period of time, these items are due from you, like many contracts do. Many contracts, they have, that's what Gantt charts are for. You run the process and you follow the time and people have to meet the deadlines. This contract did not have deadlines in it. This contract did not have those types of expectations. And I don't think it's unreasonable that they've asked. I just do not believe the money's due. And it's a difference of opinion, and it's not anything, again, I don't have any disrespect for the organization. If I was in their position, I might have asked too. But I would find it hard to believe, other than, they attended very few of our group meetings. I wasn't privy to a lot of the conversations that were had with them in the interim between the chairman and the mayor, but in the end, in the reading of the contract, in what they wrote, and they are certainly not novices at doing this. I don't support paying the money, and I just wanted that in the record.
Very good. Any other discussion on that topic? With that, I would like to make a motion that this committee would take and move forward with the idea that we will approve the branches, if you will, and then move forward with the process with Planning Next, and get this part of our strategic plan approved. Period. Guess that's the end of my run-on motion. I apologize. It's not very well worded, but I think you all understand what I'm... Can you read it again? Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we approve, when ready, the branches of the strategic plan, and therefore allowing us to move forward with the rest of the implementation process with Planning Next. That's a second.
Well, may I recommend that we amend it to use the language consistent with the documents, which would be
Thank you.
approve the goals and objectives of the document.
Thank you, Mayor. Goals and objectives. Thank you.
And that's a second.
And that's a second. So I have a motion and a second to move forward in that manner. Any discussion? Dennis?
May I ask a question just for
Absolutely.
clarification purposes?
Sure.
When we're talking about the branches, you're talking about items 1 through 7 and not necessarily, it would be like, let's take 7-1, 7-2, 7-3. It would not be the A, B, C, D portion of it. Those are the leaves portions that we're referring to.
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
So it'd be, so more specific, looking at number 7 and then 7-1, 7-2, 7-3. Just not the letters.
Correct. Thank you.
Agreed. Mr. Stasiak.
I guess I have a question ancillary to the process, or part of the process moving from this step. My thought would be, if this group approves this, we need to have a very serious conversation about a few things, in particular, ethics, sunshine, and Ohio Revised Code 717.01. I'd like to talk about that briefly, I guess, immediately following this motion, if that's acceptable to the chair, because I think it goes directly to what our next steps would be. And I think it's significant, particularly in light of the fact that 2 of your elected officials sitting over here have recently been accused of violating ethics by the general public. So I think there would be some value to that discussion, but I think it needs to occur outside of this motion.
So what you're talking about has no bearing on the motion.
It has bearing in the sense that I would support the motion if we're willing to have that conversation immediately following this.
I would suggest then that we have that conversation as part of the discussion of the motion.
That's fine.
Very good. Go ahead and please bring up what you were going to bring up.
Well, there's multiple things, not to belabor it, as you might get accused of here, but one of my concerns is I've had multiple exposure to the state of Ohio's ethics training. And for example, I don't think it's common knowledge, number one, what boards each of us or any of us are members of. I am only currently a member of the RLF board, both in my public and private life. And with regard to that, there's nothing I'm aware of right now that's going to inhibit me from participating in the conversation. Now, there are other things in my life where I certainly would have to be cautious, just like any of you. But one of the things I don't think people realize is, one, the ethics rules are, as I understand it, criminal in nature. And it's a very, very serious thing. And in terms of that, the ethics, having a conflict of interest is not illegal, as they say in training. In my training classes, what they have said is acting on those conflicts of interest is the problem. And I don't know, have any of you had the state of Ohio or taken the state of Ohio's ethics training? I don't want to presume you have. It's a 2-hour course that they certify from the state of Ohio. It's done by the Ohio Ethics Commission. Has anybody had that course? So, yeah, and I have too, multiple times. My suggestion, first part would be that before any additional work is done that would lead to details and actions, that the members of this committee, since it's online, be given the opportunity to take that course. And I think it would be advisable to take that course. Also, a number of our members here, some have taken Sunshine and the Records Law. It's certainly not as detailed and as valuable, in my opinion, as the ethics course would be. I think it would also be taking those two, that course as well. Second thing is, we haven't had any discussion on 717.01, powers of municipal corporations. And I would think, in conjunction with or immediately preceding or following this group having the opportunity to take the state of Ohio ethics course from the Ethics Commission that we have, whether it be the director of law or any individual that pleases this body, or whether you want to do it individually, that this body review and be given the opportunity to review 717.0. I can tell you from conversations in the public, particularly with some of our county officials, there is concerns about some of the items that we've discussed thus far. And I think us having an understanding of the role as individuals and our perception of that role, I think that puts us in a stronger position moving forward. So I guess those thoughts and that those areas of discussion are what my concerns would be before anything is done with those leaves in this plan. I think it behooves all of us. I think it puts us in a better position to do a good job. I think it protects not only the city, but each of us as individuals and the integrity of what we've done. I think it's a good next move. And the idea is not, as has been innuendoed, to belay or prevent anything from happening. The idea is to put us all as elected officials on this committee in a better position, best job.
Jim, I guess, thank you for your comments. We've been doing this for a year. And you wait until the last moment we're going to take a vote to bring up this, an ethics violation? I'm trying to understand, sir, where you're going with this and what you're insinuating. That are you calling into question the whole process for this last year because of ethics violations? You need to explain this more and where you're going with this and why this comes up now and not a year ago.
Great. No,
Thank
I think
you.
that's wonderful. And I appreciate the question. In terms of, I think you folks know I wasn't part of your process of determining what the tasks were that were originally listed in the subpoints, the A, B, C's, D's, and E's. But again, it comes to light that in the last month, both the mayor and I have been accused of ethics violations, and it occurred to me that our elected officials probably haven't taken the training. It's required of your fiscal officers. It's required as part of the Fiscal Integrity Act. And I've taken the ethics training probably 4, maybe 5 times over the course of my career. Only the sunshine and the records training is required of you folks, and some of you have taken it personally. Some of you have designated somebody to take it. And I don't presume the knowledge you do or don't have. The idea is not to innuendo or insinuate anything. I would not do that. If I felt somebody was doing something wrong, I would call the question and ask them specifics. I'm saying there is a lot of stuff that has been brought to us by Planning Next for consideration. There's been some consideration of that. One of the most amazing things to me when I've taken my ethics training was that not only can't you act on a conflict of interest, but you should not even be discussing an item that you couldn't take a vote on with another member who could vote. Shouldn't even be discussing it. Shouldn't come up at all. That stunned me. So you can't influence, as I understand it. That's a great example. Much like when employees, and it's not specific to this, but it's tangential, so it makes sense. Employees that have a child that's living in their home and they want to get them a job at the city, they can't bring the resume, they can't talk to the person hiring, they can't do any of that. It's considered unethical. My suggestion is simply, Chairman Wobser, that we are to a point in this process where the community has viewed some of the actions to date as improper, whether they are or not. I don't believe they are. I know the mayor doesn't because of her comments. And I'm not saying anything wrong happened. What I'm saying is there is benefit to each and every member in this room sitting down and taking that online training class before you talk about, move forward, or vote on any items deeper than this, because they're action items. Because if we have a situation where the mayor is on the Alliance Board, like she might be on other boards that I'm not aware of. I don't know if you're on the YMCA, really. But my point is, I'm on the RLF board. I don't know if you guys are on boards or not, and quite frankly, that's irrelevant to my point. My point is, every one of us should be updated on the ethics laws if we're going to move forward, and know not to discuss certain aspects of this if there's a direct conflict with another organization or something that we represent. So I merely bring it up as a point of discussion that I think has value and could help us all. Do it as a point to help us.
Mayor.
So I think one of the best things about this entire process is the fact that each step of the way has been in a public meeting, which is a very key part in any ethics concerns, because you cannot discuss information that hasn't been discussed publicly. And since each of these items were made publicly available, I have no concerns with any ethics concerns about moving forward with discussing any of these items. However, I believe in ethics training and sunshine law training is very appropriate. I know that we have encouraged all elected officials to take it. I think the sunshine law is required every other year or once a term. The Ohio ethics training is also, I believe, through that same site, through the Ohio Attorney General's office or the Ohio Auditors Ethics Commission. So I think, Jim, that's not a bad idea to recommend it. And heck, at some point, maybe it's even one of the items that's incorporated into our transparent government is, not only recommending it or, the Sunshine Law being required, but the ethics training also being required per term. It's not that difficult to do. So I appreciate you bringing up the concerns, though I don't necessarily appreciate how it was done. But I think that that can be addressed. The concern has been voiced. It can be addressed outside of this specific motion.
Further discussion? With no
I guess,
last comments, please.
well, maybe, depends how it goes, I guess. I guess I would say then, based on the mayor's comments, and there have been no comments from across the way in support or against, for me to support what we're about to do here, I'm gonna make the motion that immediately following this, we decide whether or not we then take up whether or not we're gonna move forward with recommending that training, or we could do it within this. So I could make the motion that we also agree, amend the motion, make it a motion to amend, that we agree we're all going to take and break for the ethics training prior to taking up any additional business under this.
Motion on the table that
It would have to be a motion to amend.
motion to amend.
Yeah, motion to amend that we agree to also take the ethics training prior to moving forward with any additional business on this, prior to, and I would assume we'd all have it done before the next meeting. This isn't to slow it down.
Mayor.
Well, nope, because there's a motion to amend on the floor, so I will wait until there is a.
There's a motion to amend to add ethics training as a prerequisite of this process moving forward. Am I stating that correct, Jim?
That's a great way to state it.
There's no second. Motion dies for lack of second. We're back to the original motion.
Call the question.
Question has been called. All those in favor of the motion as it currently stands signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay?
Record that the auditor voted against the motion. Motion passes. Mayor.
Again, I believe that having ethics training is beneficial. I don't think it is specifically required at this point in time, and I think that it would be better served by the entire council being addressed and them all having the opportunity to do it, and then if we want to discuss it specifically being here. But I don't think that anything within the ethics training is and I'm disappointed, again, with how this is being presented, because now the headline online, based off of things, is going to be that the committee's against ethics. And that's ridiculous and upsetting and inappropriate. So I think that this body continues to act with utmost ethics, and that we will encourage the entire council to participate this, but there is nothing hindering this process moving forward, and that implication, whether intentional or unintentional, is disappointing.
Mr. Auditor.
Thank you. There's no inference or implication. People can choose to take from this what they'd like. However, it would be, I think it's remiss and inappropriate to presume for the members who haven't taken the training that everything here is okay. Each item, each person, each board you're a member of, each thing you do, people are involved here because they're involved in the community, they're doing things, they're active. It would be naive of me to presume for Mr. Russell or Mr. Hellman or Ms. Warnicki or Chairman Whoops or you, any of us, that we can move forward. And I think that there's risk in not taking that training before you move forward, particularly with the eye that we are getting from the community. And I merely say, as a suggestion, hey, let's take this training before we do it. Much like I suggested several meetings ago, hey, take a look at 717.01, which is the powers and duties of municipal corporations. And did anybody do it? You know, at some point in time, we have to do the work that's required of us. And sometimes that work goes beyond what's on the surface. And I believe that both those items are relevant to us doing the best job we can do. And it's okay if you disagree with me, but I'm going to stand firm on my beliefs. Thank you.
Very good. Moving on with the rest of our agenda. Then where were we, Mayor? I'll turn it over to you.
All right, so hopefully you had an opportunity just to review the email that I sent out so that we can discuss it here. So the lingering items that we had, goal 1, the current version was this: a safe community where people feel comfortable in their community because of its well-maintained physical appearance and well-trained and equipped emergency response. And none of us were really thrilled about that. So put together some additional language I felt was a little more fitting. Which is a safe community where people feel secure because of proactive emergency planning, high quality response, and well-maintained physical appearance. And as we look at that whole section, I felt like that encompassed the main kind of areas, and I felt like better fit. So any thoughts or comments on that proposed language?
He's not looking at me. Can I talk?
I'm
anyway?
sorry, Beth. Yes, sorry.
You're fine. Okay. I'm going to just preface this with, I probably shouldn't say anything because I'm tired of picking these words to death. We are taking forever. I want that on the record. However,
So noted.
I don't like that. The feel secure, because unfortunately, you could go to Walmart, maybe even here in Findlay, and get shot, you know. We're all going to hope that doesn't happen. I think if we just took that out and put like due to, a safe community, like, and remove the word people feel secure.
Okay, so just get rid of this.
Well, I guess you have because of, or due to the fact that we've done, you know, the PROACT. I would just feel better for that. Just because I could read that and say, well, you know, I feel secure tonight and who knows what's going to happen before morning. That's what it made me think of, and I just wanted to put that out there.
What's the goal above this, the overriding goal that this is under?
This is the goal.
Okay, so this is the main one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so goals, objectives, action.
Other comments?
What if we take the same philosophy we did other times and just limit it. You know, that one of the goals is to create and maintain a safe community.
I guess I feel like this layout is consistent with the goal language. I think the ones that you're referencing are more of the objective level. So I think that this is should be a little more descriptive, because then when you look at the objectives, they kind of tie back to investing in the emergency response, making those types of items.
Well, and you have emergency planning, like we have the emergency management, EMA, we have police, we have fire. What else are we encompassing under this in your mind?
That can be literally having drills within our employee base. We can, doing the monthly tornado sirens. It can be all sorts of, our mass casualty plans, our hazmat plans. All of those are important to appropriate planning. That could also be planning for capital needs of a, new fire station. That could be budgeting appropriately. I think that all of those, then the quality response gets in. So I always think of emergencies, you have to plan, respond, recover. And so those kind of are the main items here. And then the physical appearance, though it may not seem important, obviously studies show that areas that have lighting, less graffiti, the broken windows theory, have lower crime. So that also does play into having a safer community.
You could almost swap that last section for what you just said, where you plan, respond, and recover, because of proactive planning, quality response, and quick recovery. Or maybe not quick, maybe there's a better word, an adjective than that. I never heard that before, but it sounded really good.
You should have read my articles during the pandemic. We talked all about that.
Wasn't enough math in them for me.
Jeff,
Yes, ma'am.
I would make a motion that we accept the proposed goal with the grade area out.
I would second it.
Got a motion and a second this is goal number 1.
Correct.
So this would read a safe community because of proactive emergency planning, high quality response, and well-maintained physical appearance. Yes.
I'm gonna vote no, because I think we need to address the third component of safety for the mayor's comments.
Which was, Jim?
Just recovery.
Recovery.
We can put high quality response and recovery in the first one.
There we go.
Would you be okay with that, Beth?
Sure.
And I would second her amended motion.
Good. So we've amended it to add the word recovery and a comma.
If that's appropriate grammar, I don't know.
I think it is.
Somebody
Always
is better
before the
than
word
me.
and in general, depending on which rules of English you like to follow.
Where can we fit an Oxford comma?
Very good. Other comments? All in favor of Dennis? Hang on. I said all in favor of those as that stands there on the screen. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously.
Okay.
So we have a goal number 1.
Okay, so on goal number 3, I just wanted to confirm, because I know we had changed it in one of the objective level items, and I think I just maybe missed it in this. In goal 3, did we want it to read, we had community pride, but we wanted to change that to spirit to be consistent throughout, correct? So it would be a a caring government that supports all community. Nope, so community spirit and belonging.
Yes. I believe that was the conversation. I would
Everybody
be in
agree
favor
with
of
that? Okay, I just thought I think we had changed at the objective level and just didn't change it here. So I just wanted to confirm before I made any changes. Okay. The next item was objective 1.3, which previously read ensure short and long-term detention needs are met. The discussion was that we didn't feel like that was comprehensive enough because that really was just about detention and not about the kind of entire continuum. So the language I put together and would propose is collaborate to ensure a continuum of services and facilities for individuals involved in the criminal justice system for effective detention, support, and reentry.
And this is 1.3.
3.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep, and I would make that as a motion.
Comments? 1.3, we're looking at the current line, correct?
No, so the current line
Or
was
proposed?
this, and this is what I just proposed.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Collaborate to ensure a continuum of services and facilities for individuals involved in the criminal justice system for effective detention, support, and reentry.
Right. So I know the conversation had been, okay, it's fine, you can lock them up, but how do we make sure that they're getting the treatment they need, the reentry they need to make sure that they're getting back into being, contributing members of society, and that's not just the physical infrastructure, but the services as well. And made sure to include the word collaborate because obviously the city's not the one specifically providing those services, but making sure that we're collaborating to kind of make sure that it's happening for the community at large.
Comments? I guess I would ask this quick question and just tell me I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
Thank you. I go back to the current, ensure short and long-term detention needs are met. Understand, it's a little maybe crude, but it sure says the exact same thing as we did in twice as many words in proposed. Is it better to have the additional wording, Jim?
I think part of the discussion was that it's more than detention today, that it's all encompassing the services. I think there's a balance between the two, though. Collaborate to ensure a continuum of services and facilities, ensure short, long-term detention needs. The thing that gets me is for individuals involved in the criminal justice system. I guess that applies to both government and individuals. But I think we wanted to expand. I think there's something there, but I don't know what it is. But to your point, it was supposed to be more encompassing than just incarceration.
Gotcha. Thank you. No, I'm good with proposed. Anybody else have any comments about proposed? 1.3 proposed? I think that does apply to both citizens and government officials. If you're in the criminal justice system, you're in the criminal justice system.
Was there an official second?
I'll make a motion to accept as proposed.
I'll second that.
Second by the mayor. Discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. 1.3 is done.
Okay, so 3.3, this was the one that we had said we wanted to add something related to building kind of community spirit. So we literally just had language that said add objective 3.3 that was about building community spirit. So I tried to put some language around that and have it read, support organizations in their efforts to build and sustain community spirit. So it's pretty straightforward. And since you guys are all asleep today, I will make that in the form of a motion. A motion.
I will second. I have a motion and a second to accept. What line are we on, Mayor? I'm sorry.
3.3.
3.3 new, correct?
Yes.
3.3 new, support organizations in their efforts to build and sustain community spirit. Discussion. With no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Was there any abstentions?
Guess not. Everybody is in favor. I did. Or did I
Oh, yeah.
motion?
Yeah, you seconded.
Yeah.
What did we do? We flip-flopped from the last one.
Right. Right.
Okay, so I'm going to do 7.3, and then we can go back to 4.3, because I know there's some supplemental documents on 4.3. On 7.3, the current language read, identify, evaluate, and execute opportunities to support a variety of mobility options. And if everybody recalls, at the last meeting, we were discussing that under, Ohio law, cities don't have the authority to establish transportation services, which really wasn't what we were discussing in the first place. It was like, how do we make sure other options are provided? So I put together, again, support local organizations in an effort to identify, evaluate, and implement, consistent with the language we've used throughout, diverse mobility options. I will make
Comments. Is that a form of motion, Mayor?
Sure, why not?
So we have a motion. Would anybody like to second? I will second that. 7.3 new. We have a motion and a second that 7.3, that line there, support local organizations in an effort to identify, evaluate, and implement diverse mobility options. Discussion. Mr. Russell.
What if the organization is not local?
So you're saying like Uber?
But locally, is going to have to drive the car, but
True.
Do you just want that word out?
You want to take the word local? I'm sorry, Mr. Hellman?
I was just gonna say, does it make a difference?
Use your microphone, sir. Thank you.
Does it make a difference? Whether they're local or not?
Mr. Russell?
That's my question. I mean, if they're not local, do we not support them?
no. So I would be fine with removing that. Obviously, our preference is always local, but I think we can have a broad discussion. So we could remove local.
So the motion is now amended to take out the word local. Discussion. With no further discussion, all those in favor of the amended objective, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes as amended.
So I just real quick wanted to revisit Goal 5. So I had lots of messages from folks providing recommendations for other words for, we had the word attractive is currently, says an attractive community, to live, learn, work, play, invest, and raise a family. So everybody cracked their thesaurus. And I would recommend that instead of attractive, we utilize inviting. That's probably my preferred one, but desirable also may be a good one. I felt like inviting kind of encompassed it without sounding, I think attractive almost sounds a little too, for lack of a better term, froofy. But so I don't know if, I just wanted to bring that back up because I know we had a little discussion and we don't need to rehash it again, but if anybody had any thoughts.
I'm fine with inviting. I like that better than desirable also. And I think it conveys the attractive point we were trying to make.
Mr. Russell?
This goal came out of public comment that they wanted a city that was well maintained, that looked good, that was a little bit putting words in their mouth, pleasing to the eye, by definition attractive. I mean, if we're expanding it to say that we're going to have a good welcome wagon, and that fits under goal 5, and that is something that the city will be part of, I can understand. But this is really a community input driven goal, and the words they used was attractive, at least in the comments that I recall from public comments.
Ms. Warnicki.
I guess I would agree with that based on what he's saying. I think I remember that too, and it also goes back to the mayor's comment earlier about the broken window topic.
Doctrine. Yep.
And the things underneath it right now, one of them's keep Findlay beautiful and et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I think the term and the definition behind attractive is supported, as well as being what Grant said, that's what the community wants to see. That was one of their objectives, so I guess I'm fine with that.
Fine by me. Just wanted to bring back some additional thoughts.
Dennis.
Jeff, I guess I would concur with the word attractive as well. I think we've got some work to do as a community to make this community more attractive, and I think we should stick with it.
Okay, then we will skip back up to 4.3, which was leverage broadband/fiber network infrastructure for businesses and residents. I'm going to skip over the proposed language for now and wanted to bring up the documents that were sent out to you. So I'm not sure, since they were just sent out this afternoon, really just so we could go over them here today. I want to just provide some background. So as we've discussed in the past, the city of Findlay has a fiber optic loop and some fiber strands that we have possession of. So the fiber loop was originally built by Findlay City Schools, and when they were doing that, it was to connect their facilities for better connectivity and higher internet speeds with all the services they provide and technology they were using. During that process, they reached out to the city, the county, and Blanchard Valley, recognizing that we're all heavy technology users as well, and that working together, that building the infrastructure out would be less costly if we partnered. The return on the investment for that project at that point in time was about 9 years, with the alternative being us continuing to purchase internet service provider services. So we did enter into a contract, and in 2017, we entered into a 30-year indefeasible right of use, which is just a fancy name for contract, which gives us the authority to utilize it no matter what. It is ours, we own it, even though it's considered a lease agreement. So with that, the city does have a number of strands. You can see the city, the county, the state 911, and Findlay City Schools are the primary users of that. The city has a number of legs, and I did have some language about like the number of strands and all, but it gets kind of convoluted. So if you really want to know that level of detail, I'll bring in Brent. But here is a map of the different fiber legs. So here's the main fiber loop that was built out. And here, I apologize, let me see. So the purples is the school's fiber loop. And then, as you can see, then some of the additional legs were added for the 911 fiber. They go out to Station 4 on 236 so that we have our backup dispatch center there. That's our dark site. As well as then the city has a number of legs that go to different facilities. We utilize them for a bunch of different things, for connectivity services to our systems, et cetera. Then there's a number of legs that are joint city and county. And the reason I say like those legs are joint is because when you lay fiber optics, it's literally glass strands that data can be transferred over very quickly. And they can have tons of capacity, and you might see them, they're like this big, some of them are smaller, but numbers of strands, and then you can activate certain pieces of them. And so they laid the fiber, and then the city owns strands of them throughout, and then we were able to expand them in different areas. So that is what this map is showing. I know the county is working, actually, my understanding is to close this loop so that they have better redundancy. But that is, when we're talking about fiber, it is currently just being used. The city doesn't lease out any of our strands that we have available. Now, that may not be something that we want to do. I know we had conversations with the hospital at one point because they're not currently leasing any of the strands. But there may be opportunity where that's a benefit because it's in place and we could utilize it for certain entities. Obviously, we may want to set different parameters around that. So that was one that was brought up. I think originally when it was brought up, it was one that, we heard from the public a lot about just fiber and broadband, and there's parts of, the city that don't have great service or many options. And so that was one of the ones that Planning Next had put in here. And then we just were trying to figure out what was the right language, because the city doesn't want to be a end user provider, right? That's not what this is. This would be, for example, a business would come in and say, I want to contract with so-and-so, and I can connect to your fiber loop, and then they're not having to pay for that infrastructure to be installed. So that, I know there were some questions on that, so I just wanted to provide a little more context.
Mr. Russell.
I appreciate the background in the strategic planning meetings I attended. The majority of the fiber conversations were folks saying, I want fiber to my house. And luckily we have companies like Metronet, AT&T, and the cable company laying
Spectrum.
fiber. Spectrum, thank you. And I think Buckeye might even be doing it. But I know Metronet's making a big effort to do the whole city, and thankfully, I don't think that the city of Findlay should be in the competition with these private companies to provide to the residents fiber. I'm not even so sure. I'm not even really nuts about us providing to business fiber. I think the hospital would present an interesting case, if the hospital built a facility off of County Road 99 and also had in their satellite offices. Do you look at that as infrastructure for a quasi-public private enterprise that I'd have to consider some more. But my objection, and this is towards the, what do cities do? Just for the same reason as I don't want to haul trash and I don't want to provide golf facilities. I want private enterprise to do that, so that because they will maintain it better and provide jobs for the folks to do that maintenance and et cetera. And so as long as we're not in that business, I don't have the objection. But I think that the reason this is in there is because the citizens thought that the city of Findlay should be providing fiber to the house. And that is so what the citizens expressly requested is something that I object to.
Mr. Otter.
I think I agree probably with the majority of what you said, Mr. Russell, and I can add to that. I attended a lot of the meetings when the creation of this and our participation in this was happening, and there was no intent to open it up. We kept minimal participation. We decided to do it on our own, bought or participated in investing a limited amount with some room for expansion. And at that time, the idea was that the outside world would get involved. And the world changes so fast. Hell, I can't even get all the Ethernet cables I need to get my executive time in, because we don't have them yet. Until they get time to put them in, they'll get time done. But who would have anticipated that, we just expanded our cables and we need, several more. And I imagine the same's gonna happen with fiber until some new technology comes out that's point to point or something that we totally don't expect. So I would think we protect that as long as possible, unless Brent would come in and the people involved with a technological understanding that could really give us some assurances what my initial understanding was, participating in those meetings.
Sorry, I started laughing. I had the idea of holographic council meetings when you're like, the technology is just going to go crazy. We're all just sitting at home and we've hologrammed in.
All right. So, Mayor, recap where we're at.
Yeah, so this one I tried to clarify it a little bit further, leverage the existing owned fiber loop for business retention and attraction. Again, removing the residential part, you know, I don't know if this is even something we want to do. I don't feel strongly on.
I would be opposed to that.
You would be opposed.
Yes.
Agreed.
But, you know, business retention and attraction is ensuring that we have private organizations that lay that infrastructure. Once again, thank you, MetroNet and AT&T and you know the existing folks for investing in the city. If it would be that when we do road projects, we are ensuring that there's conduit available to more easily run the next group of fiber or whatever it is, that's one thing. But to use city-owned fiber to help in private business, I'm not there.
Ms. Warnicki.
Did this come from Planning Next? Do we know?
I believe the language came from Planning Next. Obviously, again, the sentiment kind of came from the public on the broadband. And we do have a separate one of the action items is the inclusion of conduit. But I think it's currently under this goal. So we would want to just move it if we get rid of this objective. If we get rid of this objective, which I'm not necessarily opposed to either, again, but I think the conduit and these types of items are the ways that we can leverage, you know, that. So,
Beth.
Just, this is over my head because I'm not this technical, but do we know on the city-owned fiber how much of its availability we're using? That
yeah,
makes sense?
so I think again, it's kind of strange because the way it's looped, right? So in some areas, we're using part of their loop to transmit our data, and then our legs, we are using different capacities of our different legs. We're not using a huge portion of it. I would say, if I remember correctly, I think it was like, we're probably using a quarter of our current capacity.
Mr. Russell, I'll get.
But like the goals under here, 4.3A and B are relatively okay. I mean, in 4.3A, I would remove including city-owned, but it's just the statement of 4.3 is troubling. So
I can help.
Mr. Russ or Mr. Auditor.
They fit wonderfully under 7 connected city, where people are linked destinations to each other in a variety of ways, and then you have everything from street maintenance, mobile apps, and you actually mentioned, I think, when we were discussing this section, even fiber, things like that.
So, Jim, you're suggesting the action items A and B would move under 7, and I think
We're not discussing action items anyways at this point in time.
But they will disappear, though, Mayor. So if we get rid of, which I think we're almost on the verge of here,
Yeah, we can move those to 7.
I will make a motion, just so we can continue the conversation, that we dispense with 4.3 and move the 2 action items to section 7 for further discussion at a later date. Moved and seconded. Discussion. I would mention, I agree with Councilman Russell. We have to be careful about what we put our labels on, what we allow people to use from a government standpoint. We don't want to be in the business of helping other businesses beyond facilitating communication with businesses, et cetera. That's their job. that to me puts us in right next to hauling trash and, what'd you say, golf courses. So, Mayor.
The only thing I would mention, and I agree, I'm fine with this. I guess just one opposing view would be that those providers could be the entity that leases it from us. So a Spectrum could come to us and say, rather than us adding fiber in this area, and I'm not saying that that's good or bad that we, again, want to get involved in that. I'm just saying we wouldn't necessarily be the provider except for of the fiber, not of the service. So I will support the motion. I'm just adding in some technological insight into the discussion.
And I think that makes sense, Mayor. I don't think anything that we have in here would preclude us from looking at an agreement with a provider to utilize our unused capacity for a period of time. Jim?
To that, that's, Cablevision for years has worked that way. There's an agreement and they pay us. Food for thought.
Very good.
It's not as much money as it used to be.
Very good. So we have a motion and a second to dispense of 4.3 and move the action items under section 7. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. We're good. So 4.3 is gone, and those sections A and B will move to 7. What's next, Mayor?
I think those were all of the outstanding items from goals and objectives.
So
If you want to vote the goals and objectives out to go back to planning next, assuming so I think, at this point, the goals and objectives have been reviewed and approved. So it would be, do we want to vote them out of committee so that once we hear from, if we move forward planning next, that the thing is, we got to get this stuff to them for them to do their next step. So I think if the sooner we can do that, the better.
comments? Mr. Russell?
I'd kind of like to see them all in one group. It doesn't mean that planning next can't see the draft, but I would like to see the final.
Okay, so just the
finalized.
red line comes back cleaned up without action items.
Well, I don't even know do we need a red line at this point?
No, I just want
No,
to see the
I think
final.
Okay.
this should be our final draft. No red lines, as is Mr. Auditor.
I would say, I'm trying to keep a good historic record of this.
Yes,
So
sir.
if I could get a copy of the red line,
Yeah.
that would be
I
awesome.
have all those as well, so happy to
good
keep a
idea.
red line and clean.
Very good. But so the mayor will clean this up, give us a clean copy, and distribute that to us via email. And so that we all have a clean copy. Is anybody opposed then at that point with that, since we're where we're at right now, to forward that cleaned up copy to Planning Next for their perusal and review?
I did vote against that because of the ethics,
Yeah, we know.
wanting to review the ethics issue is the next step. But, obviously the committee's already voted to move on.
Thank you. So noted. Ms. Mordecai.
When is that? Is that like after the next meeting and we look at the clean copy and then it's going, or is that being done in between now and then?
Well, our next meeting, let's see, today is what's the 3rd? Our next meeting would be
16th, I
the
think.
16th.
16.
So we have 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks from today. So it's really completely up to you all. If you would like to review it one more time before sending it out, that is fine. Jim?
what
you How- meant
by seeing the clean
How about we have a brief meeting next week and then skip the following? In other words, just do a short meeting to send out the review, the draft, do a short meeting for all us in case we missed anything, and then just waive the next meeting. In other words, have it a week early.
Okay.
I'm not going to be here next week. I mean, I don't know how many people you need, but I'm on vacation.
Okay.
That collection's done. I'm out of here. I
You're-
planned
you're
it.
done
so
for 2
I planned
years,
it
huh?
so I could be back for the council. I was trying to, so I'm taking vacation next week.
Very good. Mr. Hellman?
I'm just gonna say, can you just send out the cleaned up copy? We look at it online and get a comment back to the mayor or whomever, Jeff, and set a date 7 days from now, and then we just send it to them.
We,
You can look online. You can be connected online.
Here.
Depending on how I'm here the rest of the week.
it's all right. So what we will do is I will put together the red line and a clean copy that I will send out both to the committee, and assuming that tonight's contract is approved with planning next, I will send it to them as well so that they can begin their process, because the meat and potatoes are going to be there, right? We're not expecting any huge major changes at this point. It would be, did I miss changing something? Do we need to rearrange something? So I think they can begin their process. We can formally approve it at our next regularly scheduled meeting. We'll then finalize to them, and then we'll go from there.
I would agree with that process, and I think, Jim, that covers your concerns. Very good. Anybody else? So we'll then, exactly as the mayor just said, I won't even try to restate it. So thank you very much.
But please do watch your emails and let me, if there's something you see that's wrong, just make sure you tell us what it is.
Motion to adjourn.
With that, before we, I will second that, Jim. And for discussion, one final comment. I want to thank everybody for your time and attention and hard work on this to get to this point. It has been quite the process to get here. I think we have an outstanding document that we can be very proud of to take forward on to planning next, and then hopefully on to council for their review, and then we'll start this process over again with council, because they'll have their chances to review and bring back comments. We'll have to discuss within council how we want to take care of that process with them, and I'll leave it up to them to decide. But I want to thank you all for your hard work on this. It's been a project. So, all those in favor, any further discussion on the motion to adjourn? Thank you. Without any, all those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Those opposed, same sign. Meeting is adjourned.